Oh my gosh. Here we are again at another episode of The Good Fat Life, Living the Good Fat Life, which is so cool and kind of what we do. And it's got its ups and its downs and everything in between. And that's why I am delighted to have our guest, Jennifer Hough, today. And I just want to say a quick little advertisement, if you will, about the magazine. So if you're interested in checking out our magazine, which has lots of wonderful articles in it and information, it's online. And you can also get a subscription, which we highly encourage because then you get to sit and feel and get your favorite beverage and just get cozy with the magazine with Good Fat Life. So that said, one of my favorite people on the planet has joined us today, and her name is Jennifer Hough, and she's the Heart's Awakening? I'm sorry, Jennifer.
The Wide Awakening.
Wide Awakening, that's right. I'm getting you and Valerie a little mixed up here. And Jennifer has this amazing biography. She's done so many fascinating things, including the largest nutrition company in
Yeah, the
Canada.
largest yeah, we had the largest clinic in Canada for quite a while there. And it was my pleasure. It saved my life as well. So happy to be able to pay all that information forward for sure. But it was the foray into everything else that I do. So
Which is so cool, right? Because I think when we're young, we have this notion like, oh my gosh, I get out of high school, I go to college, and I start in this job, and I have to make the right decision, or my life is going to be ruined. But that's not the way it works.
no, actually, it's just everything's in procession, right? It gets in one direction and then somehow at right angles something else shows up and it's just a series of ongoing, expansive, wonderful exercises and, curiosity on the adventure.
Well, and so I love that you use right angles because Jennifer has this wonderful training called Thriving Operating Systems 1 and 2. And I'm currently in 2. And we were talking about right angles, right? Taking
Mhm.
those angles and how that makes up our life, the circle of our life. I mean, you can talk
Well,
about that for
most
a
people
minute.
I know, but I think most people wanna wrestle it to the ground and have no surprises. They wanna have so many of us just especially with all the change that's going on in the world, we wanna be able to have something predictable and under control happening with our body, with our marriage, with our money, with our you name it, that's what we want perceptively. But the truth is we're here to create. I mean, I look at your life, Sherry, and I think, "Oh my god, this woman is such a prolific creator. She's creator extraordinary," including your friggin' theme song, which I love.
That's Wally Pleasant. He's the genius behind that. But yeah, right.
Oh my gosh, that was so great. And so I'm sure there's a story about that too, but we gotta understand, like, our life is designed to be a series of expansions on what came before us. We're extensions of creation. We're in the creativity of the entire universe. We're housed by that. We're in that environment. And so our natural state is to create upon creation. That's why we feel so confined when we're trying to control everything or when we get overwhelmed because everything around us seems out of control. And we're actually allowing life to facilitate us and to show us what's next and what's new and what's inspiring instead of trying to get everything to stand still. We're going counter the flow of life itself. So it tends to get frustrating, struggle starts to ensue, and it's just no fun. I mean, people are, one of my girlfriends just had a new grandchild, and then people pass, and people get old, and people get to be teenagers, and, everything is about evolving into what's next and what's next and what's next.
What's
And if
You're
we
right.
don't approach life like that, we end up losing a lot of energy, sometimes even getting sick from the resistance to the natural flow of things, right?
Yeah, no, I get it. I was in a meeting earlier today, and we're doing this amazingly creative project. And one of the my colleagues was getting really frustrated um,
Mm.
with the some of the other um, comments, and I'm like, "That's hey, dude, that's just part of the process, right? It's not. We have to find ways so that we don't
That's
take
it.
um, pushback or comments personally, because it's not personal. It's just processing, and
Yeah,
people
it
process
is.
different, right? And if you don't, and that's just creation, creativity by nature is going to be messy
Yeah,
because it's
it's our
new.
birth. Oh yeah. Well, one of the, I don't know about you. Or did you ever have the perfectionist thing going on?
Yeah,
Yeah. So I was born with the perfectionist gene for sure. And the like, think of how counterintuitive this is, Sherry. My gosh. Everything in the entire universe, and I don't mean the woo-woo universe, I mean the actual physical, scientific, multidimensional verse, okay? This existence is constantly, degrading and evolving itself, and volcanoes are blowing up and new planets are being formed. I mean, it's just constant, constant, constant. And so the way it's designed is for new things to be created all the time. And again, we're made of those atoms. It's in our subatomic space that we're here to create. So it's funny. I used to be I used to get into emergency mode when things wouldn't be perfect way back when, like I'm talking 20 years ago. And I realized that it was almost like an addiction that I had to have everything be perfect. And then I realized at some point that getting it, I started to get migraines, by the way, as a
Mm,
result. And the funny thing is, because I put so much pressure on myself to try to get it just right, but the actual structure of the entire universe, of life itself, is such that you're building on what was, so you're evolving what was, just like, cell phones and computers and, the way they cut hair and the kind of scissors you use. I mean, it goes right down to dog food, and we're constantly evolving, new kind of oils that you can use, that you can ingest, being a nutritionist. Before it wasn't bad to eat butter, now it's good to eat butter,
but right,
and
good
all of our
fat,
knowledge. Right, exactly. It constantly evolves and expands into new awareness, right? And so, if that's true, perfectionism is literally the opposite of the way the universe works or life works, which is why I would get frustrated all the time
right?
because I wasn't going with the flow. So, it's interesting you would mention that meeting. My it's so interesting. My entire team is made up of, well, they've all done the work though. Is there It makes me appreciate how deeply my team gets that there's no getting it right, which conversely there's also no getting it wrong. You can never get it wrong as well.
Right. Well, and you think about that perfect. What is perfect? That's
Right?
somebody's definition, but you ask six more other people, and it could be different. So anyway, it's interesting. But one of the things that I really wanted to talk about, because this was such an interesting when I met you and you started talking about physics, and I'm like, oh my
Uh-huh.
gosh, I know nothing about physics, and yet you have a way of making it easy, and why it's so important to the world we lived in. In fact, that's what your book Unstuck is a lot about, right?
It
You
is. The subtitle is actually "The Physics of Getting Out of Your Own Way," which I keep saying things like, "It actually shouldn't be the physics of getting out of your own way," although that's a colloquialism, so I get that's why we did it. It's more like the physics of getting out of the entire universe's way so you can live in overflow, you know? But, that doesn't sound as good.
So we'll talk a little bit about it because it's fascinating. And by the way, your book, the last I heard, it was bestseller in 7 countries. Is that
Oh,
right?
it's now 8. We added
8?
France.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh, darn. Bestseller in 8 countries now. So tell
Oh,
us about it, Jennifer. I mean, what's the bottom line on that? All of that.
the bottom line is this, that in the macrocosmic sense, we are, of course, physical beings with all sorts of beautiful senses. Being able to see and taste and touch and build buildings and make new, cell phones and all the things I talked about earlier, which is part of our creativity. And we forget at the basis of who we are. Kind of like if you took a really powerful microscope, you could get all the way down to looking at subatomic particles and waveforms and quarks and all sorts of crazy stuff. But most people are only aware of what happens in 3D. You know, someone will say something like, "Well, here are the 10 steps to making tons of money," or "Here are the 5 steps to making sure your body's healthy." And when I was a nutritionist, what I realized very quickly, and when I say quickly, I mean within 5 years, because I would that's when I was having migraines, is why I became a nutritionist. When I got migraines, I could only get 2/3 better from the migraines, and I thought, "Why am I only 2/3 better?" And my clients, I got about 2/3 of them completely free of migraines, and then a third of them couldn't get better, and I thought, "What is going on here?" And I realized the issue had nothing to do with what I was putting in the body physically, was actually what was going on in the body as a result of something called, and I'm just gonna simplify it and call it epigenetics. Another way of saying that is psychoneuroimmunology, and all of those are really big words that really fundamentally mean the perspective you hold on life governs the chemicals you have in your body. And if you don't change your perspective on life in a foundational, fundamental kind of way, the genes that play out in your body are literally gonna be the same as your ancestry, and you're never gonna be free. You're gonna get the same breast cancer that your mother did. You're gonna, the outcomes start to become very predictable. And most people look at their symptoms, and so did I back then, as pains in the butt. Like all my symptoms are pains in the butt. I have a headache, and that's like my light on my dashboard is blinking. And most people, what they want to do, like Abraham Hicks says, is they just want to slap a happy face sticker on top of it and
Right.
just hope that it goes away, right?
Right.
And I got some I got some lights on my dashboard going off. And I know that this is all of a sudden I realize this is my body talking to me, and it's giving me messages. And until I change the way that I perceive my body, I perceive my life, I perceive, what I have access to happiness, I have access to flow. Until I do that, my body is going to be a microcosmic representation of the degree that I struggle in life. It exudes this, it gives off the same chemicals internally according to the perspectives that I hold, and that's how we get disease. So the rest of the 1/3 of the migraines and depression and fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue that I had disappeared entirely once I started to be able to master both the laws of biology, but also what I call biophysics, which is taking the smallest particles within us, our waveforms or quarks or whatever they are, and understanding that we're made up far more of those small particles than we are of the three-dimensional particles, that they comprise far more of us. And if I can understand how those smallest particles operate, then and I can operate in concert with them, then all of a sudden my life becomes a symphony that's actually in harmony with the universe at large. And
Uh,
and
that's a
yeah,
mouthful.
yeah. Yeah, but it's true. You
Right, and
understand?
it's
It's like if I can
yeah.
understand the bottom line is because I started by going and looking at cells, but then I realized I had to go smaller than cells and go to atoms. And then I
Wow.
realized I had to go smaller than atoms and go to subatomic particles. And I realized literally that the more in flow with those subatomic particles, the more in flow with how the universe actually works, i.e., it's very simple principles. What you give out comes back. Where your it's like a radio station where your frequency is at. I'm going to say where your mood is at so we don't get too out there for people. Where your mood is at is literally what you attract,
So
right?
let's
So,
right. No, and
yeah.
I do understand what you're saying in a more lay person's terms because
Yes.
physics just did me in, but I appreciate them, right? And I
Yeah.
appreciate that what you're saying is true and valid, just based with my own experience. And um, I had a story similar to your migraines, only with fibromyalgia. And once
Mhm.
I learned or was exposed to a different way of thinking, um, it changed everything. And it wasn't, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this, Jennifer. It wasn't,
Mhm.
I didn't have that language that you're using, but
Yeah.
I was exposed to Abraham Hicks, or the power of our thoughts, and
Mhm.
what we think, and the frequencies and those ideas. And so I developed practices, right? A daily practice of meditation and mindfulness and
Yeah.
changing, being aware of the words I use and those kinds of things.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so on a practical level, so what would you
Yes.
say, for somebody who's listening and they don't even know where to start? Where do you start?
Well, okay. I found for myself that the more I understood the foundational science of why it's true that what you think matters. Because remember, before I did any of this stuff, Sherry, I was an accountant, I was an economist. I worked for like a multinational company doing friggin' spreadsheets and you know, it was
Be
crazy.
careful.
So
I love spreadsheets. So,
no, I still love
yeah.
spreadsheets. Trust me. No, no, no. No,
Yeah.
I'm very left brain, right brain. And so everything had to be logical to me. So if someone said thoughts are things, I thought, why are thoughts things?
Okay.
Like,
Right. Right.
I
Okay.
wanted
Got
to
it.
know why. And I wanted to know why if I change not my thoughts. Wasn't interested in thoughts because that was too slow for me. So then I thought, well, if I change my beliefs, then all my thoughts should change. So then I started looking at beliefs, but then I thought, no, I want to understand the whole enchilada of how the whole universe works. And then I want to line up with that, no small thing.
Right. Right.
But I'm
Okay.
going to take one concept. Okay, we're just going to take out one concept from physics that
Okay.
is the one that made me fall in love with the whole idea of understanding the science of loving your life. Okay, the physics of loving your life. Okay.
Okay.
So this is what I looked at. I was really struggling because I was in all these programs where I was analyzing the living daylights out of all the reasons why my life wasn't working. And it was okay. At least I had some awareness that my past was affecting my future. But I had heard somewhere that one person can change the world. And this is where it started. How does one person change the world? The reason wasn't because I read the Bible. It was although at that point I had. It was for a different reason. I was in the streets of Toronto and I was working with street kids. And I had walked one of those street kids over to this, intake for psychiatric patients because they thought that she probably, was schizophrenic. And she was 15 years old, 100 pounds soaking wet, little itty bitty thing, and she would have been eaten alive on the streets. And when I dropped her off, she had finished telling me the entire story of her life. It's a story that I expand on in the book, but the the basis was I dropped to my knees after she told me the story of her life in the middle of the streets of Toronto, and I just bawled. I'm like, "How is it possible? She's just one girl, and I know I've talked to hundreds of them, if not thousands, and then that's just Toronto. What about the whole entire rest of the world?" And I felt sort of hopeless. And I just felt this I felt 3 options wash over me. One option was to change my career working at the big multinational and just, become a social worker and save lives, which I honor them, but I couldn't do that because I noticed how many of them just became numb to their feelings. It was too hard.
Mm.
So the second option was take her home. But if I took her home, I'd have to take home 1,000 kids, right? So
Mm.
that's not an option either. So I said, and at that point, I was really questioning whether there was a God, a universe, anything, any kind of form of higher power. I thought to myself, or I was feeling through it, and I just felt this overwhelming idea that any one person, including me, could shift a world. And the reason was that if I shift the way that I look at life, not just my thoughts, not my beliefs, but I actually take the entire way I look at life and shift that, my beliefs would change, my thoughts would change. And that's when I first got the idea that one person can change the world, but that's not the science of it. So here's what's powerful. Here is the first sort of metaphysical idea that I that had ever affected me powerfully, where it all started. I didn't discover this, but through my reading and other people's discoveries, I found that we have between 30 and 75 trillion cells. That's a lot of cells.
It's hard to even comprehend. Yeah.
I always say to people, think that there's, 8 billion people on the planet is 10,000 times that number of cells. So all the number of people in the planet, you got 10,000 times that number of cells living in perfect harmony,
Right.
living in harmony. Okay.
Oh my
So,
gosh. Yes.
so
Okay.
this is biology. And I'm thinking, wow, that is like if my 50 trillion cells can live in harmony, and they're speaking to each other. That's really interesting. But then what I started to study, and I actually went and experienced this firsthand, is that plants give off photon packages of light and they actually communicate to each other not only through their mycelia and through the fungus in the ground, but they also communicate with each other through just sound waves that they give off from the leaves from one tree to another. You can actually record the sound, them talking to each other. It's amazing. And I thought, wait a second here. Do human beings do that? Is every living thing do that? As it so happens, we give off photon packages of light from our cells, not like a woo woo concept, like a real concept, like we do. So what are those photon packages of light doing? Is it just sort of like, "Oh, cool, we have light coming out of us. Whoop-de-doo," you know? No. We even have receptor sites for light particles coming to us from the sun and from other people. Well, why would 50 trillion cells be exchanging light particles between ourselves? Now, you might think that only happens in a room. Like maybe this is the explanation why, when you walk in a room, you know, you know the people that you like and you know the people you don't like. Maybe the photons are communicating something for goodness sakes, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Because I wanted an explanation for intuition too, right?
Okay.
So I'm like, why are we exchanging light particles? That's weird. So then I found out that light particles travel around the Earth 7 times in a second. Now, Sherry, already we've got 50 trillion cells to 75 trillion cells. That's like a huge number, right?
Right.
So now think 75 trillion cells, each millisecond by millisecond, giving off photon packages of light that are traveling around the Earth 7 times in a second. And we're all sending, receiving to each other. We think you and I are just like I'm talking and you've got 2 ears, and then you're talking and I've got 2 ears, and that's all that's going on. But there's a whole other
Wow.
level of communication happening. You with me?
Yep.
So now the question was, how do thoughts change the world? Why can one person with their shift in their perspective on life change the entire world? Well, if I'm communicating to you and to 8 billion people with 75 trillion cells that are giving off a communication from me, regardless of how much we know about what that communication is, it's part of intuition. It's a part, your body is partially communicating the mood or the way you're navigating life out into consciousness, and people are receiving it. And you know that because you can walk in a room and see the people you want to talk to and people you don't want to talk to, and you haven't even said anything to them yet and you can already tell, right? So it's a form of communication. So imagine that this form of communication, communicating with 8 billion people times 75 trillion cells times photon packages of light. I thought to myself, well, I need to know something about this because if my life matters that much, I want to be responsible for this life.
Mm.
And if your life matters this much, then you might want to be responsible for this life. And it just so happens with my little nutritionist biologist brain that the same shifts that I was now starting to make because I started to understand the laws of physics and photons and how it all worked. I now started to understand that my cells are also talking to each other and they don't have any resistance to each other. They're harmonious like crazy. And they're operating things that I would even begin to know how to operate, and it's all happening for me. So, when I combined all of those characteristics of life together, I realized that this is not a life to take for granted,
Mm.
that my biology actually reflects my, let's say, my willingness to be inspired by those facts. And the more I align with the idea that I affect everything through my beingness, 75 trillion cells times millisecond by millisecond times photon packages of light. I was not responsible to change the world or anyone's world or this little girl's world that I had just walked to the psych ward. More I am, I get to. I get to do that. I get to make a difference. I get to be who I came here to be. And it actually took a lot of pressure off. It gave me a reason for being a better person, not just because someone else said so. Scientifically, there's an explanation. You understand what I'm
Mm.
saying?
There's so much in what you're saying. There's so much possibility, right?
Hmm.
Right, and then and inspiration and motivation and um, right. I can see where it's like it's not a pressure; it's more of a inspiration.
Yeah, well, think about it. The migraines I had went away because of this information. So it did turn literally, quite actually, from pressure to being excited to get up in the morning
Yeah,
because how I lived my life today mattered. It's not to say, gosh darn it. I mean, I am not perfect again, we talked about perfectionism. What the hell is perfect anyways? I don't even know what that is. But I certainly seek the flow. You know, I seek how to dance in flow with life and with others. And it's not because I'm trying to keep life in control, which would be a stressful reason to do it. It's because it's more fun. It's
yeah,
because it's more meaningful too,
sure. It's a lot more
right?
fun, right, and
Yeah.
meaningful.
Yeah.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
it makes each day an adventure.
And my cells respond in kind. My cells are telling me, haven't had migraines, hadn't had all of these the depression I used to have, all of that stuff. It is pretty astounding how much your body follows your willingness to be in alignment with how nature actually works. So, um, it's our health is a direct reflection of all of that, which is why my love of epigenetics is so in the forefront of my mind all the time, because that's what epigenetics is how do we plug into life that then governs so much of our biochemistry. So, the book is about all of that. Unstuck is about that, but drilling into exercises to help us embody that way of being so that, you know,
On a
honestly,
practical
Sherry,
level,
well,
right?
ultimately, the reason I wrote the book, Girlfriend, is because I think a lot of people feel really not empowered at all. I think they feel, powerless, in fact.
Right.
And, everything I just described is the reason why we all are powerful, but when we give our power away to other people and organizations and concepts, and it doesn't matter what side of any issue you're on, as soon as we give our power away to any of that stuff, no matter what your belief system is, you're not in your own knowing. And that's what really changes the world. It's sort of like, your heart is the universe's megaphone.
I
So,
love
yeah.
that. I've never heard that before. That's
Well, you know.
I love that. Yeah, I know you always come up with stuff that's like this little brilliant thing. Well, that is so. I'm so glad that you wrote the book, just because there's so many pieces and parts, and
Yeah.
the book like pulls it all together, and like you said, provides examples and exercises and things you can do that bring it down to you today, um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
It
and
yeah.
guidance on how to move forward because it's a process. Um,
Yes. It is. It is a process, right? It's
right.
that's why it's like literally there are 12 chapters with 12 exercises that if done sequentially or even non-sequentially, what happens is you start to be able to see the principles of physics work in your life. Most people are seeing the principles of physics work in their life to their advantage all the time. They just aren't aware of it. And most
Mm.
people don't even realize they're running around learning how do I manifest things? And I'm like, dude, your entire life is a manifestation. There's no time in your life where you're not manifesting. The question is, more about receptivity and more about, the frequency at which you receive stuff. It's not about manifesting stuff. So there's a lot about that as well. And yeah, yeah, it I'm so glad it came out now. I was gonna write it years ago, and I thought, "No, this is just so perfect with everything going on."
Going on. Oh, yes, there's a lot going on. But it's and isn't it interesting to that point as well? Is um there's times of our lives where we're trying to force things and for whatever reason it's just not right. And if we
Yeah.
can and if we can kind of listen and just say, "Wait, I'll just give it a little space." And there's a difference. I think you can tell the difference between procrastination and giving space. I don't know if
Yeah, well, procrastination is self-judgment. Okay, get this one. Okay, you ready? We gotta breathe in this one because
okay.
I don't want anyone to miss it. Because when I first heard this, I'm like, "What now? Say that again?" Okay. Procrastination is the state of judging yourself when what's really going on is all of the variables aren't lined up for it to happen effortlessly, and you're beating yourself up because you're operating on your timing instead of universal timing.
Oh, that's
You
beautiful.
get it?
I'm gonna have to put that in the magazine. That
I mean, it's
is,
juiciness, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that is huge, and we can tell the difference. That's the part. Um,
Yeah.
we can tell the difference when we stop and pay attention. Um,
Yeah, sometimes you're in a really not a great mood and you're forcing something, And from the energy of forcing or like my life won't be the same unless this thing happens, life won't let you have that happen because that's a mistruth. So you can't have something come into reality or be created into reality when the very um, essence with which you're approaching it is incorrect according to universal law. In other words, your life will be complete without this thing. So you're not gonna get this thing because you're trying to force it to happen in order for you to feel complete when you're already complete. Therefore, you're not going to get it. We can't help you create something based on a lie, right? So there's and these are the kinds of things that I love to be able to show people so that they can just relax and um let it be so much easier. Life is hard enough just being a human,
Mm.
just being a like people come, people go, friendships end, you move cities. I mean, there's so much. It's a lot.
It is a
And
lot.
right. And so to be able to have tools that allow us to navigate, at least for me, it's been probably life-saving, honestly. The doctors told me I should have died back then when I didn't know all this. So I'm glad I didn't. It's a good
Wow.
thing I didn't know it back then.
It is a good thing, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you wrote the book. And I find I haven't read the whole thing yet. I true disclosure, um, because I'm waiting for the hard copy, which will be out in what, a week? Is it here?
Yeah, it is here. It
Okay,
is here
so
now. Yeah.
I do better with hard copies than on the iPad. And so I'm waiting for my hard copy so that I can read it, absorb it, do the
Yep.
exercises, and just let it be. But I will say, from the bottom of my heart, I am so grateful for the things that you've taught me. And as I've applied them to
Mm.
my life, I'm just like, whoa, this is not just woo woo stuff. This is the real
No.
deal. Um,
Yeah.
it really changed things. Some things have really shifted in my life just because of some just scratching the surface on some of the things you've taught. So thank you
Aw,
for that. I appreciate
thanks,
it
Sherry.
immensely.
That really means a lot. Thank you.
And I'm
Thank you for
so
saying
glad.
that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I can't say things if I don't mean them.
Yep.
Um, and I'm so glad that I'm grateful that you were able to join us on our Good Fat Life podcast to share with our listeners. And I have to do a quick shout out to our sponsor, to Snedecor's Cleaners. Found out today that somebody was hanging their laundry, their cleaning out to dry or out on the like on a clothesline to get.
Yeah.
And they were asked about it, and they said, I want to get the chemicals out of it. And we were like, oh my gosh, there are no chemicals at Snedecor's Cleaners. It's chemical free cleaning, and your clothes come back in actually better than when you sent them off because of the treatment that they get. It's a nature
Absolutely.
thing. It's sand that they're cleaned with, which is pretty amazing. So you don't have to hang air dry your clothes or air fresh your clothes before you take them inside. So we're
Yay,
just
that.
grateful. Yeah, exactly. So I just want to be sure that people get that there are no chemicals from Snedecor's cleaners, and that's a huge advantage. So, Jennifer, one last thing. Can you just say one or two sentences that you would suggest to somebody who wants to get started on this path? I kind of asked you that before, but this is like just a little thing that somebody could start today after
Like a
listening to you.
practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's my favorite thing. Natalie Ledwell actually named it for me. I called it something else, but I like what she calls it better. She calls it an evidence journal.
Mm.
So every night before you go to bed, get an evidence journal. It could be one of your kids' like workbooks or, whatever you want. It could be a binder with loose paper. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be special or it could be. And just start collecting evidence every day of the things that are happening for you every day that you aren't even intending and yet they still occur. I started with bodily functions that happen that I didn't ask for, I didn't intend, I didn't, nothing. Like, they just happen in my body. Like my heart pumps and oxygen exchanges and toxins leave my body and my eyesight works. And I didn't literally I did not have to intend any of that to make it manifest in my body. So it's lists and lists and lists, and when you do that, what happens when you go off is just a small thing. I mean, of course, there's a whole thing about the operating system you were talking about before, but just that one thing to be able to collect evidence every day, and then what you have to be is you have to be vigilant for the evidence, right? Because you're gonna write it in later.
Mm, mhm.
So now during the day, you have to be vigilant for evidence. It starts getting fun. Vigilant for the evidence of how much life is operating for you. An evidence journal of how life is operating for you. And then whenever you get stuck, you have something to go back to. And it also puts you in the direction of being vigilant for it, which actually changes your general mood over the course of the day. So that's where I would start. It's just a small thing you can do to align more with physics.
Got it. Well, I did. I started doing that a couple months ago, and I have to say,
Yay.
it. No, it is. I love it. It's been um, mind-boggling, and all of those things. Just of all that's really happening, and I'm sure I'm just getting. I'm sure I'm just scratching the
Yeah.
surface. Right.
Yep.
It's a practice. So, well, thank you so much. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, we have all of your websites and your contact information will be posted on this link. And
Great.
yeah, she's got so much. Jennifer's got so much resources and things to check out. Why don't you give your website?
Sure. It's thewideawakening.com/3 days. It's the number three and then days. So that's the best place to go if you want to stay in connection with everything we're up to and all the fun things.
That's good. Well, congratulations again on your book. That's
Thank
phenomenal.
you.
And yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for more. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, Sherry. I'm so glad, especially when it's a good fat show. I'm all about good fat. So
That's right.
I just
That's right.
had my MCT oil. So
There you go. So I know as a nutritionist, and we've had this conversation, you appreciate good fat and the benefits of good fat. And that's why we made Good Fat Life, is because we found the people that appreciate it and know and
Mhm.
understand they want to hear about the epigenetics, right?
Yep. Yep.
Because they get
It's
it.
all of it.
It's
Yep.
all of
It's
it. All
perfect.
right. Well, Jennifer, we're going to go out and live our good fat life.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.